Welcome back to Run It Back, the home of your 24th ranked UConn men's basketball team. We'll start right there. 24th ranked in the country. The AP poll came out this morning. What do you think about that?
A little surprised. This is the worst week they've had all season. Getting the egg on Tuesday that was laid against Creighton. I mean, that was god awful. Like, it rivaled Providence a couple months ago at this point. And then Nova on Saturday, which I wasn't surprised because Nova coming off a loss to Marquette. Nova is way less likely to lose 2 in a row because of how great their program is than we are. So I'm a little bit surprised, but I think KenPom ratings and just the name alone, I think voters were like, we'll keep him in for another week. So I'm happy but surprised.
Yeah, if I was an AP voter, I would not be ranking UConn right now. They played terribly the last week, and they were at full strength. You played a Creighton team who's not very good, and you played a Villanova team who's shown real signs of weakness, specifically in the front court, and UConn just couldn't exploit that. So what is the strength of this UConn team right now? It's tough to tell. 85-74 loss at Villanova. 85 points they let up. This is supposed to be a defensive-minded team that wants to play games in the 60s. They go out and let up 85 points, including a career-high 24 to Eric Dixon, who probably most of you have never heard of pregame, because I'd never heard of him. Isaiah Whaley and Adama Sanogo pick up 2 quick fouls each. And we were there. I mean, once that happened, it was kind of like, yep, we're toast.
Yeah, I mean, going into the game, the whole storyline was UConn's front court will exploit Nova's front court. But it was the exact opposite. We saw Samson Johnson way earlier than I ever would want to in a basketball game of this magnitude. And he got exposed on a couple plays. And like you said, Sanogo and Whaley getting into foul trouble, that was kind of it. It was such a long game, but we kind of felt it. We were like, how are we going to beat them? Because their strike, their perimeter guys, their wing guys, and the whole game plan was feed Sanogo. That's the game plan every game, so it's not unique to Nova, but because they're so strong, they wanted to pick apart the weakness that we thought they had, when in reality it burned us because 2 quick fouls from each of those guys, and we don't have that. I mean, a Cook's hurt now, so it was Samson. That was it. I mean, unless they wanted to dig Richie Springs out, but that wouldn't have gone better at all. So it was disappointing, that kind of foul trouble that early. It's inexcusable. When you want to bounce back from a stinker against Creighton and have a statement win on the road against a team like Nova, just can't happen.
The other thing is, though, when those 2 guys went out, nobody picked up the slack. Tyrese Martin had a hot start, but Andre Jackson was a net negative. Jordan Hawkins played well, but you can't be relying on Jordan Hawkins as a freshman against Villanova. RJ Cole, 5 turnovers. Yeah, he lit it up, over 20 points again. Had a good stretch in the second half, but 5 turnovers when you're playing against Colin Gillespie, an old man who never turns it over, that's not going to do it for you. So there just wasn't enough of a supporting cast. Another tough game for Tyler Pauly. He's just in a rut. Right now, he's really not playing effectively at all. And personally, I'd like to see Jordan Hawkins take his minutes, because what we saw from Jordan Hawkins gives me a lot more promise than what we've seen from Tyler Pauly for right now. That doesn't mean it'll necessarily carry through for the rest of the season, but I don't know. Hawkins shows me a little bit more right now than Tyler Pauly does. But all in all, you get those 2 leaders in the front court in foul trouble, and like you said, when you're without a Cook, you don't have a lot of front court depth, and things just turn downhill quickly from there. And you can't dwell on this, because number 18 Marquette comes into town against UConn tomorrow night at the XL Center, a place where UConn has not been playing very well recently, and this is a must-win game for UConn. Do you agree with that statement?
1,000%, because you want to avoid playing on the first game of the Big East tournament. Not every year is 2011. We don't have Kemba Walker. We can't just rip off wins like that, because let's say we fall and play in Georgetown or DePaul the first game. Those are minutes being exerted when they don't need to be. And we're thinking long-term here, take it game by game. But obviously it's all about seeding for the Big East tournament and what can get us to March the best way possible. So it's a must-win. Every game from now on is a must-win. I mean, I think Nova was, and they didn't win. And it doesn't get easy. It doesn't get easier at all, because we have Marquette, and then we have Xavier, who lost at home to DePaul. So they're pissed off. They want to win. And then they go to MSG on Sunday to play St. John's, they took us to overtime here in a game that we should have had long before overtime had to come into play. So every game's a must-win, but Marquette especially, because we beat them in their place. And they remember that. They haven't lost too many Big East games, so that's very fresh in their mind. And I know they're going to come. I know Shaka's going to have them locked in, so it's a must-win.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with you and say that every game from now on is a must-win, but the Marquette game is absolutely a must-win because you just cannot go back to the XL Center and lose again. Because if you do, all the people who are on Twitter right now screaming about the XL Center, myself included, they're just going to add fuel to that fire. And this would be a third loss in the Big East at the XL Center when you haven't lost at home, at home inside Gampel Pavilion, at home on campus, at home 100 yards away from where we're sitting right now. You haven't lost a Big East game there this season. So it doesn't make sense to be playing at XL Center where you're, a significantly worse team sometimes. So they got to come out. They got to beat Marquette. From there, the schedule doesn't get any easier. Like you said, Xavier, St. John's. Then you come back home. You get Seton Hall. You get Xavier again at home, and then you get Villanova. So there's a lot of opportunities for some Quadrant 1 victories, but UConn's got to start playing better. And let's talk about that. The team has been too inconsistent all year to me. That's been their biggest problem. Now it's college basketball. That happens to a lot of teams. But just too much high and low. You have Adama Sanogo, who I think was scoreless in the first half against Villanova, who many think should be the Big East Player of the Year this season. But I ask, how can you be the Big East Player of the Year if in the biggest game of your season, you put up a goose egg in the first half? You have Tyler Polley, who's really struggling to shoot. You have Andre Jackson, who was playing so well during the 5-game win streak, but has played so poorly during the last 2. There's just too much high and low. What can this team do to right the ship and get back on the right track?
I think it's all about execution on the offensive end. I think I've seen reports of opposing coaches. They know that. They know our game plan, and they know if the play isn't run the first time or the second time, they're screwed on offense. I've seen way too many possessions this year of terrible shots. I've seen shot clock violations. At the end of the Creighton game, that Andre Jackson Hail Mary 3, that had no chance of going in. And that's inexcusable because these possessions are far and few in between. It's just inexcusable. The offense, like you said, it's inconsistent. Yeah, RJ gets his 20. It might come at 30%. It might come at 50%. But that doesn't matter because other guys got to get involved. Tyrese can't start off the game as a flamethrower. I think he got our first 10 points. And same with Whaley against Creighton. We can't have one guy having the first 9-10 points. You're not going to win a game. You're not going to win a game. There's no chance in this conference, this top 3 conference in all of college basketball, you're not going to win games like that. And the laziness on defense, because you said we're a defensive-minded team, there were so many just blown coverages and guys looking at each other like stupefied. Polley and Jackson and Polley and Hawkins, they were like, was that your guy? It's like, doesn't matter because it's 2. And
how about that
now
play?
We're down 15.
How about that play where Sanogo guarded Gillespie for a full possession?
And shocker, they got a bucket on that possession.
I mean,
shocker.
How in the world do you have Adama Sanogo guarding Colin Gillespie for the whole possession? There's not one time you could have switched out of that. It's just little things like that UConn has to tighten up because there is no James Bouknight on this team this year who can just go out and get a bucket and keep them in games.
And even then, last year we've seen the same struggles when he didn't have it. Guys don't step up. So while other guys should be able to step up because we don't have a guy like Bouknight, no one's up to the task. And we've seen how good this team is when guys step up. They can beat anyone in the country. We're going to continue to harp on it until they lose another game. They beat Auburn, and no one else has beaten Auburn this year because guys were stepping up, guys were making their shots. Defense, you had to give up 109 points, but there weren't lazy coverages. There weren't like, was that your guy? Was that my guy? There was no Sanogo on Gillespie. There was none of that.
Right.
And especially coming out of timeouts, while we're on the topic, Hurley calls a timeout and nothing happens. I think you're better off not calling a timeout because, yeah, you have them, but what's it going to do? It gives the other team a chance to get their defensive sets, and it puts us at a disadvantage. I never thought calling a timeout would give the other team an advantage, but it does. So the execution is just so poor, and if they're going to do that against Marquette, they'll lose by 15 tomorrow.
Yeah, so Dan Hurley is now 0-8 since he got to UConn against Greg McDermott and Jay Wright, who are 2 of the best coaches in the Big East.
Absolutely.
And Jay Wright, when UConn cut the deficit to 47-40, he called a timeout because UConn was climbing back into it, plenty of time left in the second half. Villanova immediately comes back out, goes on a mini run, and from there the game was over. It was over because Jay Wright called the timeout in the right situation. He stopped the bleeding, and then he went out in that timeout, and he coached his team up. He said, we can't keep turning it over. We got to execute on offense. We got to lock down on RJ Cole. RJ Cole, a couple of turnovers right after that. Villanova runs away with it. So Dan Hurley's a good coach. We know that.
Yeah.
He's taken this program to heights that we haven't seen in the last handful of years.
It's been 7-8 years, yeah.
Right. But UConn is not an elite team in the country yet.
No.
And part of that is because Dan Hurley has had a bit of shortcoming as a head coach this season, whether it's on the offensive end, out of timeouts, or whether it's against Villanova, defensive lapses that plagued UConn throughout the entirety of the game and led them to give up 85 points in a Big East game.
Yeah, and we've seen guys like Ryan Hawkins and like Eric Dixon go off because the whole game plan is make those guys beat us. We don't actually mean it. You can't just forget about those guys. And Eric Dixon, he kind of ate Sunogo down low when he was in the game, let's be honest. But a lot of his buckets were wide open dunked, wide open layups. That can't happen. I don't care if he's not Colin Gillespie. I don't care if he's not Jermaine Samuels. He's a D1 basketball player playing for Villanova, a team that has won 2 titles in the last 5-6 years. It's inexcusable, and we need more on both ends. It's giving up 85 points. Yeah, they scored 74, but a lot of those were garbage time. They're cutting the game to 11 with 4 minutes. They had no chance. There was no chance. Maybe a backdoor cover, but we didn't get that because they played like garbage. So there's got to be more. There's got to be more across the board. It's easier said than done, but the little things need to happen because the little things happen, guys will make shots, guys will get to the line and hopefully make their free throws, and they'll come out on top of these games that they need to have.
Yeah, they need to have this next one against Marquette, XL Center. That place can get loud when it's full, when UConn's on a run, but historically this season and the last couple of years, UConn has not played their best ball there. Hopefully the next episode will be in a bit better mood. Hopefully not a rant episode.
Less ranty. We apologize, but it's just been tough to stomach. It's tough to go home and look in the mirror and think, I was happier before this game happened.
That's all we got for this episode of Run It Back. He's Jacob Sondick. I'm Noam Watt. We'll see you for our next episode.